It now gives me great pleasure to introduce our next subject matter expert, who's going to address us on exactly drunk squirrels. No, future uncertain, continuous divides, and volatile tomorrows, which in other words is drunk squirrels. Right. So Julian Talbot is the chief technology officer of Sectara. Julian doesn't look it, but he's got over 35 years of international consulting experience and specializes in enterprise risks, cybersecurity, and strategic planning. Julian is also the recipient of many industry awards, including the Australian Security Medal, and is also here. We actually could be in the library today, but Julian is also the lead author of the Security Management Body of Knowledge book. So after you bought David's book, make sure that you get Julian's book as well. Gives me great pleasure. Julian, please. Thank you.
So as usual, when someone says, could you like to speak on a topic, I work out about 4 hours and then I try to distill that down into something manageable. We'll see how I achieve it or not. There are a couple of things about wicked problems that are unfolding, and that is simply that we don't know what's coming and we don't have the frameworks, as David said, and we are going into the world where we don't know much about anything, frankly. So there's this great little definition of wicked problems. We all know what we're looking at. And Weber and Riddle came up with a long list of criteria for wicked problems. I like confidence because it's shorter. A couple of the key takeaways, and the bit that really stands out for me in this is there's no reset button. You know, we don't know we've got the right solution until we do it, and we don't know if it's going to work until we've actually put it in place. And that's a big problem. You know, that's really the hardest thing. We don't get to rewind, reset, and undo. So one of the things I want to talk about today is the haves and the have-nots, the divides that we're going into. And Wayne Gretzky became one of the greats of hockey for a lot of good reasons, but one of his mottos was he skates to where the puck is going to be. And I think that's not what we're doing today. We are in this room, obviously. However, as a species, as a group, we're looking at where the puck is right now. And it's a bit like the old joke, how do you tell the extroverted risk analyst? They look at your shoes. I am completely incapable of looking at my own shoes and looking where the puck is right now, as you will see. So let's have a look at this. So my latest book is called Future Uncertain, and it comes out today on Amazon. So there you go. Have a read of it. Thank you. Going forward
after you've bought my book.
You'll need 2 books today, at least.
Collaboration, gents.
That's it. Teamwork. The book is called Future Uncertain for a couple of reasons, because we have an uncertain future, but the level of uncertainty is equally increasing. So, you know, I could have called it uncertain future or future uncertain, but it's equally true. And I want to put this in the sense of, you know, 100 years ago, 1,000 years ago, for 300,000 years, we kind of knew what the risks were. You know, there was plague and there was famine, there was war. You know, would we make it to the age of 80? Almost certainly not, but maybe we would, maybe we wouldn't. But over the years, we've been taking that level of uncertainty down. You know, we're not dying of plague and famine in the proportions we used to. But what's happening today is we've now got the traditional famine, plague. We're now dealing with AI, we're dealing with technology, we're dealing with geostrategic risks, we're dealing with climate change. They're all increasing. And beyond that, from going to a narrowing focus, we're actually now increasing uncertainty. And if you look at those sort of bars, you'll notice it's about 5 times, you know, gone from 10 to 50. And by the way, you should take all statistics. 75% of all statistics are made up on the spot. So I wouldn't take these numbers to the bank. And the reason they go out 100 years in the future is because that gives you plenty of time to adjust this forecast. But I think you get the idea. We're going to this period of volatility where we're contributing to making it more uncertain. The range of possible outcomes is increasing exponentially. The risks that we're facing, we have no real clue. We do have a few clues, and I'll talk about a framework today and a bit of context for it. And I'll give that framework around the idea of artificial intelligence. So, you know, it will be transformational, it will be good and or bad. It'll be a tipping point for life on this planet. It won't be a black swan. We can see it coming. We'll see it in foresight, not in hindsight. It won't just be a paradigm shift either. I think it's something beyond that. It's species transition. It's a, to use the word paradigm doesn't do it justice for you. We're actually going with this. And I'll show you what I mean by that. Now, it's not going to be an existential risk. People say, at least not for humans. Probably not, okay? I'm a risk manager, right? So I'm going to put that percentage point on there. I worked for a couple of years in Africa, and it was deep in grass hut territory, and these were our neighbours. And you can see this is exactly how the people lived in that area. Now, have any of you ever seen a Terminator film? Okay, we've all seen. Have you ever seen a Terminator film set in Africa? No, they don't go there because, like, honestly, people living in grass huts are no threat to the machines, to the AI. There's not even any interest. They're just not going to devote any resources to Africa. And there's a whole lot of other places in the world you can argue as well. But I'll take Africa because it's a good example. This is Lake Tanganyika, which was near the camp where we worked. To give you an idea where we were 5 days drive from the nearest espresso machine. Remember that thing, because espresso machines are important, right? They come into play. Lake Tanganyika, and you'll see they're a middle-class family. You can tell because they've got mud brick instead of grass walls. If you look in the distance, just on that little peninsula out there, you'll see the glint of a tin roof. They're the upper-class family in that area because they've got mud brick and tin roofs. This area, this photograph, is the Rift Valley. So Lake Tanganyika is 1.5 kilometres deep. This is where Homo sapiens came from 300,000 years ago. Now, an equally beautiful spot, Lake Talbot in Sumatra. The scene of the largest volcanic eruption that we know of on the planet. About 75,000 years ago, Lake Talbot erupted and created a volcanic winter that lasted for about 10 years. It entered a 1,000-year cooling period for the planet. And depending on who you believe, we were down to 40 breeding pairs of Homo sapiens. So 75,000 years, and the most optimistic estimate is 10,000 people survived. Think about that. That was only 300,000 years ago. So if we think about AI and existential risks and what have you, at a species, the worst case scenario is like in the Matrix, the machines black out the sky and basically all humanity dies. Somewhere in Africa, in the Rift Valley, Homo sapiens will survive, and it will only take another 75,000 years to get back to espresso machines and iPhones. So that's the good news, okay? So it's not an existential threat, 75,000 years setback, plus or minus. So let's put that in the context to where we are in this population just over the last couple of thousand years. If I went back 300,000 years for our entire life, it's basically pretty boring, right? It's just down to 40 breeding pairs. But what's happening is an interesting transition here. In 2007, we crossed the line from a rural species to being urban, and we are increasingly urban. So we're living in an urban environment. As David said, we're beside the oceans largely. We're in big cities. Now, that's good and bad, right? Brittle, fragile, all these things. The nice thing about this, we get more access to electricity. Now, along the bottom, the x-axis is the urban electricity, and you've got the rural, urban on that Y and rural. Ideally, this line would be, everything would be on the line, or ideally would be up there, the 100%, we've all got it. But what you can see in this is, overwhelmingly, if you live in an urban centre, you have electricity, which is great. However, it's also brittle. We are incredibly fragile, and now most of our population is in this nice electricity generating area. Now, this is basically a proxy for a whole lot of things like sanitation, flushing toilets, running water, supply chain, beer, all the important things in life that come to us. But we are now facing this sort of transition where, as a species, we moved into that. We're also doing something really interesting, which we're not just urban versus rural. We're moving into this transition where we are virtual. So we're building online worlds. We're building a space where we can interact. The Apple glasses are out soon. Meta's building a metaverse. That may be the most spectacular day in history. But we're changing the way we live and think. I want to talk about intelligence versus consciousness. Can anybody tell me here why Homo sapiens are the most intelligent species on the planet? The theory, anybody? It's not hard. It's because we define the word intelligence. That's it. That's when you get down to it. That is why we are the most intelligent species here. Now, you'll see a lot of talk about AI becoming conscious. And what does this mean for humankind? And what is it really significant? I mean, at that point, they become conscious and they want to take over the world. It's a red herring. Forget about it. It doesn't matter if AI becomes conscious or not. It's completely irrelevant to what happens in the story of evolution. I cannot, if I stood here all day, all year, I could not prove to you that I'm conscious. Nor could you prove to me that you are conscious. There is no scientific evidentiary way to prove consciousness other than this definition that we defined around our experience of the world. So if you then think about us as a processing machine, as a clever organism, this is a proxy for computing power in the world. And basically I had to go with cycles per second per $1,000, because if I actually put all the transistor chips there, it will be ridiculous. The Homo sapien line will be nowhere. But if you think about it, you can add onto, let's call it 8 billion people, you can add about 14 zeros on the end of that to work out, because there's about 10 to the power of 14 to 10 to the power of 19, depending who you believe. Cycle per second potentialities in a human brain. But if you add the billions and trillions of dollars times cycles per second, and Apple Computer alone was $400 billion last year. That's just one company. So, put another 9, 10, whatever zeros on the end of those cycles per second. That's what's happening with the ability of AI. Our cars, our elevators, quantum computing is just happening and leaving humankind behind. So when you look at that line that's going all the way to the top, that's computing power, as versus what we thought was an exponential rise in humanity. We are becoming marginal increasingly. And what's happening is we're building the singularity, which according to Ray Kurzweil will probably happen around 2045. And that's the boundary point where we can't see beyond anymore. We can't differentiate between humans and AI. We can't tell biological versus technological intelligence, and we can't predict what's happening. We're going from an IQ of ChatGPT, which is 150 as of a couple of months ago, and someone tested it. Clever humans, 200 IQ, let's call it, for some of the cleverest people around, 100 for most of us. We're now building a connected machine with an IQ of 1 billion. To pick a number, like beyond anything we can do. And we're creating this haves and have-nots, where if you think about insects, a hive of bees, we think about chimps living in the forest, humans in the suburbs. We'll move online to the virtual worlds, partly to escape death, partly because you might want to escape life, whatever it might be. If you're gaming in a virtual world, if you want to upload to the virtual world. But the AI universe will become this other thing entirely, which we'll be connected to. And people who are augmented, choose to have the chip implant or even to upload potentially, will live in this world of vast richness. We think we have access now with our iPhones. We'll have instant access to everything, which is great. And then you have all the humans who choose not to be augmented, who live in the suburbs, hopefully in a benign way, a benign existence the way we treat chimpanzees living in the forest today. And the chimpanzees are about as aware of our urban life as we will be of the lives of the people who've augmented and upgraded, which is great. But there's a couple of problems. The problem is the bandwidth problem. This is what Neuralink is trying to solve with brain implants and a few other companies. Our keyboarding, even if we use voice dictation, our reading, maybe we speed read, we're still in a couple of hundred words per minute. So Neuralink is saying, okay, we'll build this chip implant, we'll connect to the system. We'll have the phone in our head all the time. We'll have access to this billion IQ machine to solve all the problems we need, to organise whatever we want in our life, and it'll be connected to the universe, and we'll all be connected to each other, and we'll be doing this thing, which is really great in theory. But if you want to talk about a wicked problem, ask yourself, if you're this billion IQ machine, and the equivalent metaphor is that a bunch of houseflies land on my shoulder and ask me to dedicate my life to helping them find the freshest piles of cow shit, how much do you think the fly is going to be controlling me versus how much I'm controlling the flies? And when we connect to this big thing with the Neuralink, and we're we think we're in charge of this billion IQ machine. We're not going to be. We're going to have to be thinking about what does it mean even to be human at this point? And Thomas Schelling spoke about nuclear war when he was talking about this curved slope. You know, you don't know when you're falling, and we're walking out onto a curved slope. We know that we nor the onlookers can see the point at which we reach. It's not a tipping point. It's not like a nice cliff. We can go, yep, everything's happened. We're already on this slope. And AI is an example I use as a wicked problem because it's the biggest one we're facing. Climate change, by comparison, is actually relatively small. As big as it is, it doesn't really compare, in my view. And if you think about this timeline, we moved essentially from, papyrus through the printing press to the internet, and now we're looking at this chat GPT to use just an example of all the LLMs. But where the puck is going to be, where we need to be, is singularity. So there's no point saying, okay, well, we've got chat GPT and we're busy focusing on how to use it and all these other things. We need to be thinking about 2045, because that 2045, the way quantum computing is going, that could be next year. It's that fast that we won't know until we wake up and everybody's busy, chatting and watching computer games or whatever your particular favourite might be. Not in this room, of course. We're busy doing risk stuff, important stuff. But as a species, we're basically thinking about what's at our feet. So let me talk to you about how evolution really works. We all know these fight, flight, freeze, and there's that last one's got too many syllables. There should be really a single syllable word for that. I don't know. But this is one chapter from Future Uncertain. It's a concept, a model that we're working on for a while called Wayne hypothesis, the Wayne of empire, the Wayne of species. And essentially, if you look at Homo sapiens, on the x-axis, there's a gene, dopamine receptor D4, DRD4, which is, depending on how it manifests in you, you are more prone to novelty, to risk-taking, basically looking for new adventures. There's also the MAOA gene in humans, which makes you more, is correlated with violent tendencies. And you see these type of things, and let me give you an idea. The nurturers are an example of, and these strategies, by the way, are how species exist. So as individuals, we use fight or flight, but as a group, a tribe, or a species, there are only 4 strategies. You either nurture your young and your land, and you go to Cinque Terre in Italy, if anyone's been there. They're little stone houses on the edge of the sea, and every generation builds another floor on top of the house. So you basically got 4 generations all living on 4 floors of stone houses perched on the edge of cliffs. So they nurture the land and they will not leave. Now, we all have the capacity for it. So that's not to say they don't have adventurers who take off for greener pastures. Out of the Rift Valley, the adventurers spread out in this diaspora of humanity through Europe and the rest of the world. Novelty-seeking risk takers, people who ride motorcycles, for example, are very, very high on this particular behaviour. And you see the warriors versus the nurturers in environments like Rwanda, Hutus versus Tutsis. You'll see that in Serbia and Croatia, where people say, I'm not leaving my village, this is my birthright, this is where I live, and I will stay here. And of course, over the hill, a couple of warriors are going, limited resources, we want your resources, we're prepared to kill you so that our tribe gets access to the resources. And then empire builders, Roman Empire, British Empire, we've seen it all. Australia is a nation that was colonised by empire builders, people who ran away to sea at a young age or joined the army, moved overseas, and now it's a nation of adventurers. There's a whole lot. This is a chapter by itself in this whole process, unpacking this. But to put it in the context of AI, they're still competing for resources. It's just not land. It's processing cycles. It's cycles per second. So they are looking for what will be successful. So it doesn't matter how many AIs we build or how many protocols we build into them. These 4 strategies will manifest in AI, which is successful and replicates and steals or seizes and maintains cycles per second on the quantum computer or whatever it might be. So if you think about the nurturers, these are the risks, right? We know the source, it's AI. We know the consequence, bad things happen to humans. The event, these are just the events. And I won't go into it now because it would take a while to unpack. But essentially you see things like, to keep it simple, empire builder will co-opt and acquire, it might be a marketing AI bot. If it's got a glitch in the code which causes it to also opportunistically take over other pieces of code or other pieces of hardware, then it will prosper, it will flourish, it will thrive, it will become dominant. Likewise, you might have code which introduces the risk that says, I'm not going to do anything to protect. I'm not going to change, no matter if this great new technology's out, this new medical treatment for people, because it hasn't been proven safe, so I'm just going to keep giving the old drugs. All these little things to unpack, and by the virtue of these, they start to build a broader, they see processing cycles. So they breed, they prosper, they dominate, they take over the rest. So this is a little matrix that Miles and Jason and I built for a book we're working on, the consequence calibration matrix. So you can see positive to one side, negative to the other side, and essentially where we need to put most of our resources in wicked problems, to the point, David's point about Japan wasn't ready for the event. Houston wasn't ready for snow. We need to be thinking about what are the likely things that are major. And we know these things are likely, they're major. We should prepare for them, we put our resources there. But that's that problem that Toby Harris was speaking about. You don't get any gongs for preventing something that might or might not have happened. So we put all our focus into here in the commercial aspects. We should probably also put a fair bit into things that might happen, which are really bad. But what do? This is how we focus our resources. Scarce resources, because they're not abundant, they're not maybe that scarce, but we think about all the work that's been going into this ChatGPT, large language models, Meta's marketing machines, DeepMind, all that focus, and they're creating a potential wicked problem, which we can see coming. And there's just a couple of people, and I'll give you Neuralink as an example, saying, definitely we know AI is going to be a problem. And SpaceX, which is saying, well, maybe we need a backup plan, which is to get off the planet if it does become unlikely. So these are the ways of thinking about risks and trying to focus on that space. What's really bad and really likely, instead of going, what can I really make money out of them, making the most money today? So that's a very quick view of it. That's the QR code if you'd like to read the book and the rest of the chapters. But that's my take on wicked problems and where we're going with AI.
Thanks, Jules. I'd just like to question one thing on your slide, though.
Please.
You had South Africa in electricity in the past. That's more it doesn't. It just needs to be a little bit down this way more.
That was out of date, mate. That was 2022.
Oh, fine. Good. I was checking on that for you. We've got a question that's coming from Anonymous. And Anonymous asks, you talk about the curve we're on. How do we know when we're about to drop off the edge? And more importantly, how do we articulate that to our colleagues?
That's the problem. That's exactly the problem. We don't. And we will never know. That's the wicked problem. It's a slippery, imagine a gravelly slope, and that curve disappears below us. We've got to David's point earlier, we need to be prepared, knowing we're going to hit it. We just don't know when. Put a parachute on. There's no stopping it.
And one of the themes that I got was the only thing that is certain is uncertainty.
Yes, and more of it. Bring it on, please. Have some more uncertainty.
You want to put the cape on, don't you?
I'm living the dream. Thanks, Dave.
Thank you very much.